Hi there. In this session, we're going to take a look at one of the listening tasks, and that is fill in blanks. Now, for this particular task, you do have a certain amount of control over the timing yourself. So my advice would be to, before the audio starts, quickly read through the text. You're not trying to read it carefully. You're not trying to guess any of the words or think about what go in the spaces. You just want to get a slight understanding of what the topic's about. And when I say slight understanding, you want to know that you're talking about mountains, you're talking about students at university, or you're talking about the environment or something like that. That's sufficient for you to be able to then carry on with the task. Now, with the audio playing, what you want to do is to move your mouse, move your cursor, and click it in that first empty box in the text, and then you wait. And as you're waiting, you're listening and you're following the words along on the screen. Once you get to that box and you hear what the speaker says, you're going to type in there what you hear. And obviously, then you won't be able to follow the words with the rest of the text as the speaker continues to speak. So you will get a little bit behind with that. When you're typing in those boxes, don't worry about the spelling. Yeah, we'll worry about that at the end. If you're struggling to write that word, don't write the whole word. I find it's quite useful to write the first couple of letters and also the last couple of letters of the word. That's because it prompts me to know what the word is at the start, but at the end, I need to know what the form of that word is. Is it going to end in an ed, an ing? Should there be an s on the end? Is it an adverb with an ly? So that kind of information is just as important as the word itself. So the beginning and the end of the word is quite helpful. If you don't like to type that fast or you struggle with that, perhaps it would be easier just to write all your answers in a vertical line on your erasable notepad and then type them in after it finishes. But do bear in mind, you need to have a bit of time for that as well. Once the audio stops, that's when you go back and you worry about the spelling. You very carefully read the words before the box, the words after the box, and you check that you believe the form of that word is correct in that space, and you check the spelling. And you do that with every single answer, and then you do it again. Okay, check your spelling several times. I know in the pressure that you're under and the time, and you're worried about that. I know myself that I can jump over mistakes and not notice them. If it helps, read the word out aloud. You don't have to shout it, but you're not prevented from speaking during the exam. Read it out aloud. Sometimes when you read your words out aloud, you realize there's a spelling mistake in there or that there should be an S on the end of the word, for example. I hope you're enjoying this series of videos that I'm doing. Please give me a like. It really does me a favor and helps me to continue bringing these videos to you. Okay, so now we're going to try out the fill in blanks exercise on the screen. This is just from one of the online practice apps available out there. So with this one, we're going to make sure that we click the mouse into the boxes as we fill in the answers constantly. We don't wait to get there. We click those boxes as soon as we can. As we're listening to the man or the woman speaking, you'll see here the words are highlighting in green as I move the mouse across them. You don't want to be moving your mouse across the words as you're listening to them. You want to have your mouse in the box ready for when you get there. Otherwise, you're going to lose time. But you do want to be following those words with your eyes as you're listening to the person speaking. The other thing that I'm going to do is when I fill in the word in the box, perhaps if they're going quite fast, I can't complete the whole word. I might only be able to write half of it. I might get the spelling all wrong because I'll just be banging away on my keys without really managing the word. But I'm going to do that because I'm going to get to the end and finish them all and then go back and do my checking and my editing because the words will be relatively fresh in my mind still. So be thinking about the form of the word as you're doing that. We want to make sure we're getting a noun or an adjective form, and we need to remember that when we come back to checking. So we don't want to spend too much time in our checking thinking about, which form it should be. We should already know because we've given ourselves a clue somehow when we typed it. All right, let's give this a go and see what happens.
I think that's not going to be such a viable option for Cerberus, but that may be the way that they're going to approach it. Private equity, of course, is supposed to have the advantage of taking management out of the spotlight of quarterly profits and industry analysts and prying shareholder eyes, and that hypothetically gives them a chance to take slower, more patient routes to doing something to turn a company around. I would hope, and I have some, I guess, optimism that some of the Cerberus team will have some creativity and imagination.
All right, so now I go back and check because I couldn't spell it correctly. It's such a viable option, private equity and industry analysts. So you see, I got the S on the end, analysts, because I needed to know that it was plural. This was a hypothetically, so I got the "cally" on the end. I wanted to remember that. Hypothetically. More patient. I was very lucky to get that one because it moved on so quickly, and I wasn't waiting for it. And then the last one was optimism. Optimism. Hypothetically patient. Analysis. Okay, I've checked all my spelling. Let's submit it and see what happens. Whoops, there we go. It's a perfect score. Well done, me. But you can see how I had to reduce my answers down to a very incorrect form, incorrect spelling, and go back and check it later because I couldn't keep up. Even though I felt that man was speaking quite slowly and pausing a lot, it was still quite challenging. So I had to just do what I could do and then go back and check it. Now, if we look at this particular test in more detail, perhaps you thought that would have been a very hard test to complete. There's something that you need to do outside of test practice to get yourself prepared for this kind of task. Now, you'll never have time to do this in the exam. Okay, so this is not what I'm saying. I'm saying outside of test practice, how can I improve myself in completing these answers and try to get the right form of the word? I might hear it, but I might not be able to get the right form. So outside of test practice, you need to be thinking about what would go in these spaces. So for example, in that first box there, I can see it's going to be such a space option. Option is a noun, it's a thing. So if I've got an a before it, then I need to have something in that space that is probably going to be an adjective. I put my little ADJ there to tell me it's an adjective. An adjective is a describing word. It describes something else. And if we check the answer we had before, there we can see is viable. Viable is an adjective. It means like possible or a good option. So that's that box. Moving on to our next box, we have the word private space, and then of course is supposed to private in that sentence appears to be an adjective describing something in the box and then continuing with the sentence. So that box is a noun. It's a thing, a private something. It's a private equity was the answer that we had. Moving along again, need to read a bit more of this sentence to make sense of it. So I got over here, we've got management out of the spotlight of quarterly profits and industry something. I naturally say something because the industry is kind of describing the thing that's coming next. Now, industry is not really an adjective. It's actually a noun. So it's what we would call a compound noun. I don't want to complicate things for you there, but sometimes we have compound nouns where we put two nouns together, but the first noun is behaving a little bit like an adjective because it's describing the second noun. To make that a little simpler, if you think about very old-fashioned, doesn't really happen anymore, but like car, radio. Car is a noun, radio is a noun, but the car is telling me where the radio is, it's describing it, even though it's two nouns together. And then the next space, not so easy to guess once I've read that through, but I have noted the two commas come before that space. It's only going to be one word. That's the rule of this task. So I'm expecting a word that sort of connects one part of the sentence to the next part of the sentence. So it's got like a linking role, but at the same time, might not be a very complicated linking structure because linking structures quite often have several words. It's going to be an adverb because that's what most linking structures are. They are also conjunctions, but we won't go there at the moment. So if it's an adverb, quite possibly it has an ly on the end. Not always, but quite possibly. In fact, the answer to this one was hypothetically. So it does have an ly. But it was something that was going to sort of move me on to the next part of the sentence and link the two bits together with those comments. And it's an adverb. Moving on to the next space, we've got more, and then we've got roots. More often suggests, especially when it's got a space before a noun, it suggests an adjective in there. So it's going to describe the roots. The adjective that they had was patient. Patient in that particular context is an adjective. And then finally, I would hope, and I have some, I guess, something. Some is the word I'm going to use to prompt me there. Some generally precedes a noun. It could be an adjective, but there's no adjective. Sorry, there's no noun after that box. So that has to be the noun there. And that's how I approach that kind of task. Now, this is the kind of thing you want to practice perhaps before you listen as you're doing task practice. Again, you won't have time to do that in the exam, but the more you can think like that, because you've done this kind of practice, the easier the task is going to become, even when the language is quite complex to deal with. So think about stepping away from the task sometimes and just preparing yourself grammatically for these types of things, and it'll start to become a lot more familiar to you. So as you're listening, and as I was listening, even though I couldn't get the words down quickly enough, I knew when I heard the word what form it was. And I think you'll remember that when I got to hypothetically, I just put hypo, but I did put ly on the end because I wanted to remind myself it was an adverb with an ly on the end. So perhaps think about typing the first few letters and the last few letters of the word you've just heard. And then when you come to check and edit, you fill in the gaps in the middle. The other thing to think about is vocabulary and spelling. That is something that's quite difficult to manage. I don't recommend you start learning lists of words that people suggest you should know for the exam. That would just be so hard and so boring. What I recommend is, as you do these practice tasks, whether it be the reading or the listening, is to keep a list of some of those words that you found difficult to spell. So for example, if you found viable, that was the answer up here. If you found that difficult to spell, and it was an error, then I would make my own vocabulary list. And in my own vocabulary list, I would start making notes about the words I had struggled with spelling. And you can pick that from these tasks, but you could also pick it from your essays if you've done some essay practice with some of the apps that are available and you've been picked up on your spelling there. So add that to your list. Keep that list either in a notebook, or I would say keep it on your phone these days. And you can always check your phone when you're waiting for someone, when you're waiting for a bus, you've got 5 minutes, you open it up and you look at that vocab list and you test yourself. So a couple of little techniques there that hopefully would help you in improving your approach to this task or managing this task.